welcome on board, and over to Iman and Camilla. And I'll take.
Thanks, Abhi. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cobra. I am Sharmila Nair. I'm a co-moderator for the panel. I'm a lawyer based out of India with over 10 years of experience in IP and tech matters. I will be co-moderating with this with Iman. I write on legal policy development in the field of AI, and I'm a UC Berkeley alumnus.
I'm also a lawyer from UC Berkeley, and I specialize in intellectual property law. I'm also a public interest litigator with some experience in legislation writing, and I am a founder member of the Robin Hood Army, a charity based in Lahore.
Thank you, Iman. Today's discussion is extremely pivotal, I think, in understanding how dispensation of emerging technologies aids in the growth of women, while simultaneously redefining traditional norms of bifurcated work across genders. I think we all understand that, and we all are experts in the field where data is technically the fuel for emerging technologies, and how, if there is a biased data set, how the results can be extremely skewed in the matter, and often it can result in more disruptive tendencies than advancement of society in certain cases.
While I agree with Sharmila to an extent, I feel that emerging technology like virtual reality or artificial intelligence, even your basic social media platforms, they've given women more opportunity, if anything. I mean, especially, living in a developing country, I know for a fact that women here, some of them come from very restrictive backgrounds or cultures, and social media, if anything, is giving them a chance to learn, to educate themselves, to gain exposure, even earn some circumstances. So it's empowering them. But I think we should leave it to all of you, our learned panelists, and ask you what you think. We have with us today Elena Sinel, who is a social entrepreneur at Teens in AI and Afghan Aspirations. She is dedicated to empowering young adults to solve real-world problems using technology. She is an experienced keynote speaker. She has been on the panels for BBC and the UN. She's spoken on topics related to work in AI, education, future of education and innovation, robots replacing human jobs, Generation Z, and equipping Generation Z with the skills to handle 21st century jobs and careers, and making STEM careers more attractive for women. Elena is a bachelor's in politics and international relations from the London School of Economics, and a master's in conflict security and development from King's College London. We also have with us Ms. Gulilai Khan, who is a development communication governance and gender professional. She teaches at the Lahore University of Management Sciences, lecturing on internet governance and technology policy. She has an MSc in media and communication governance from the London School of Economics, with research in gender and the third level digital divide in Pakistan. Ms. Gulilai has also authored a chapter on gender in the Punjab Growth Strategy 2023 of Pakistan. She trains women legislators on inclusive planning and budgeting, as well as women leaders on leadership and communication. Ms. Gulilai is the founder of Pakistan Professional Women Forum, and she works in close proximity with the Ombudsperson, curating their conferences and workshops to ensure a safe work environment for women in Pakistan. She has over 18 years of experience in gender and policy in development in public and corporate sectors, and she's spoken widely on these topics as a public speaker. Sharmila?
Our third panelist is Dr. Clarissa Rios-Rojas, who's a research associate at the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge, where she works at the interface of science and policy making. Dr. Rios uses her experience and scientific background to conduct research on the risks of emerging technologies, to provide scientific evidence and advice to policymakers and international institutions around the world. In 2015, she founded a nonprofit which is focused on the empowerment of Latin American young professionals, and she has had the opportunity to be selected as a UN Women's Champion for Economic Empowerment, a UNESCO delegate, and expert reviewer for the European Commission, amongst several other esteemed designations. So, fourth, we have Ms. Muazma Zahid, who's a Principal Engineering Manager at Microsoft Azure, where she enables customers to deploy the most demanding data workloads on Azure. She has been a data engineer, architect, and a speaker for over 13 years, working on several big data, cloud computing, and AI technologies. She is an active researcher in biomedical engineering, and her research software is used in EKG machines all over the world. Moazma is an advocate of diversity and currently leads the AnitaB.org Seattle community. She is also a leader at Women Who Code. Fifth and our last panelist is Ms. Samia Khalid, a senior applied scientist and AI engineer at Microsoft, lead at PWIC, which is Pakistani Women in Computing. She is working with large-scale distributed systems to create Microsoft's next wave of intelligent experiences in Microsoft Office 365 and Outlook. She also has immense experience in the AI-powered vehicle maintenance domain, where she holds a patent for her master thesis work. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you, Sharmila. Let's move on to the questions now. I'd like to request all of you to please wrap up your answer to each question in 3 minutes due to time constraints, so we can fit as many questions and we can cover all panelists. Elena, our first question is to you. With emerging technology, including artificial intelligence, it is said to mimic human reactions. Now, considering the unbalanced representation of women in the data pool, do you think that leads to biased data sets? And if it does, what kind of risk assessment do you think is necessary to ensure that all data that is collected is completely gender neutral and it is valuable in nature?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on this panel amongst the most incredible panelists here today. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation, which I think is vitally important for us women. So there are less than 20% of us in tech, which is shocking, given that we are living in the times when technology is shaping the world, and it doesn't seem like we are part of the entire process of shaping, so to speak. So we definitely do lack women's voices when it comes to developing technologies, and that definitely results in the biases in the outcomes of the technology we develop. So currently, the majority of technologists out there are male. They're white male, based in Silicon Valley in the West of the world. And unfortunately, unless we redress this unfortunate imbalance, we are definitely going to have to put up with the fact that a lot of the technology that's being produced out there is very much still biased. The kind of data sets that we're training our models are still not representative of the makeup of the population. And that's not just talking about women. We don't have enough LGBTQ, we don't have enough Black people, people of color, Asians in technology. So it's really, it's not as diverse a place as we would like it to see. And so something definitely needs to be done. And I'm hoping all of us, as part of this discussion, will be able to make some suggestions and discuss what really can be done to redress that misbalance, so that when it comes to the future of technology, it is a lot more representative and really, targeting the kind of, the makeup that we all represent in society. And so if there are women and other genders and other ethnicities that we are targeting with our technology, then really they should be part of the conversation and part of the voices represented in the teams.
So, Elena, my second question to you is, with tech emerging, efficiency, of course, is one of the main goals. So with that comes automation. If it's automated, it'll happen quicker. But there are complaints about women being displaced because of such automation. For instance, there was a feature in on the Amazon website as far as hiring was concerned, which was automatically filtering out women. So what kind of accountability do you think is necessary for companies who are responsible for this?
Well, definitely the accountability lies with the companies. So I'm glad Amazon has decided not to pursue this technology, because clearly it was very much biased against women for a good reason that I had just outlined earlier. The majority of the people did technology, or the kind of data sets they're using, was probably also not very clean and not very unbiased. And so to me, the responsibility very much lies with the companies who are hiring women. I am the type of person who really advocates quotas. I use quotas whenever I run my programs. I ensure that there is balance of all genders and there is balance of various diversities, not only gender diversity, but multi-ethnic groups who are participating in our programs, and also diverse in terms of neural diversity. So we do have a lot of young people who are, who have ADHD, who are autistic, who have schizophrenia, and others who are welcome in our programs. And I think we need to embrace kind of abilities and various disabilities as well, and various genders and ethnic. So to me, the responsibility very much lies with those who are hiring. To upskill, to train, women who would remain then relevant and needed in the workplace. And I think there are some companies who are doing this really well. Quantum Black, McKinsey, who have already argued the case that diversity matters for business. They are definitely paving the way and showing how it's done. There are other companies like Microsoft who have worked with, who have commissioned us to develop a program to specifically encourage more girls into AI and data science. And the program is known by the name Alice Envisions the Future, or Girls in AI. So we've run boot camps with hundreds of girls across the world, including Seattle, New York, and San Francisco, but also in South Europe, in Warsaw, Romania, parts of Europe. And we even went as far as Africa to really encourage more girls into data science and AI. And those are the companies that really show that diversity really matters to them, and they will do everything they can to upskill and train up women so that they are relevant and automation does not affect them.
Thank you.
Alina, are you with us?
Yes, Aman?
Yes, please, Shamila, go ahead.
Thank you. We just moved to Muazma. Certain applications are often designed to work efficiently to end discrimination, but due to the data quality or the pattern. Now, for example, previously there was a search on CEO on Google, and you had a lot of images of, like Alina had mentioned, the white male at some time, and many of them, and you'd have one skewed single image of a CEO woman. Now, often this is a reflection of one aspect of bias, but it's also a reflection of reality at times. Now, to what extent can we avoid such patterns so that the system does not have skewed results?
Thank you so much for inviting me for this panel, and thank you for that question. I think, as Alina mentioned, bias exists everywhere. So the first point for all of us is to accept that we are all biased in certain ways, right? I was doing this research which shows that there are 150 plus different types of bias, which means that we are all biased in many different ways, like there's conscious and unconscious bias that exists, right? So when we're building these systems, the biggest part that we have to do is to make sure that a diverse set of people are included while building that piece of software, that application, whatever you're building, and then it's tested for that set of users as well. The reason why Alina was mentioning a white male is because people who are building these are in that demographics. The other piece that's also missing is not just the gender, there is the intersectionality of hundreds of other things. So age, sex, religion, your preferences. There are so many other things that make your data diverse. So when you are building something and which is pointing towards a specific subset of the users, it is going to work with those set of users only if you don't test for the scenarios where there could be diverse set of users in different scenarios, right? So your question about like why this data shows right now, that's the reality of what our current systems are. Systematic bias exists in every single piece of software that you actually build. And unless you build systems and people around it that can fix that in a very slow and painful way to hire more diverse candidates, to include them in while building that, it's going to take some time to actually show when you are doing these searches on the internet, right? So it's a process, but I think some of these companies, as Alina was mentioning, they have taken the step to take a step back and look at where in the process this bias is, what can they do, what can they do in the hiring process, what can they do in the equity process, what can they do in the inclusion process to make sure that we can make a difference and we can build something which is not biased.
Follow up with what you were saying. So in that case, considering demographics are different, would you then require a data quality controller at the inception stage? Because the data may be biased, so it may be lopsided for certain demographics based on how different regions function, right? So it could still be biased for one region but not the other. So would you require a data quality controller right at the onset? And then also follow up on that would be then you'd also have to check the ethics and the morals of the data quality controller, because you'll have to check that at the first stage and also the data that's getting fed in. So it's like a two-stage quality check, right?
Yeah, so I think I would say it's probably 3 or 4 stage data quality checks. It is not just the data, as I mentioned, like the teams are building that. That's also very important, because if I'm building a piece of software, the demographic that will come to my mind, I'm from Pakistan, would be something similar, that where my conformity bias, my bias would kick in, and I would be thinking about the end user who's like me, right? So you need people from diverse background to actually design these things. So when you are actually, even before building the team to build something, when you are writing the specs, you need perspective from people from different backgrounds. Again, your customer set might be of specific demographics. What you need to know is, in the demographics, are you understanding their needs? Are you understanding what they're bringing to the table, what you need to build, which actually kind of matches to what their needs are. There's this very famous piece of software for vision detection. I think there's a video about it where it was able to detect a white mask, but not a woman with a darker skin tone. So it's because people who built that never tested with that set of users, right? So I think those things in terms of data quality, ethics around data, who are building, why they're building, who's the end user of that, and eventually making sure that throughout this process you have checks and balances and you're testing across a wide variety of users. One of the key examples where I would give you in a piece of software that I was working on a couple of years back is that when we built the software, we were thinking about teenagers of the age from 14 to 18, right? We were thinking of US teenagers and we were building something for that. And that software became very popular and it was used in China. We saw right away that the way Chinese people are using it, or the teenagers over there, is totally different. The way they use emojis, the way they are, that's very different. So right away, in like 2 weeks, we had to sit down, rewrite everything, and think about the scenarios, how it would be different. So again, thinking from the user perspective, thinking about diverse, again, not just diversity in terms of just gender, there is like hundreds of other things you need to consider. And if you are thinking all of that in the process, it will not be too late for it to actually ship in and find out those issues. So all of that needs to be part of the process itself in several stages.
Iman?
Yes, Samit. So let's take your opinion on the matter. There's debate on how emerging technology is a threat to women because of certain biases that seep in through data and other kind of machine learning. For instance, if data is collected, either it can be outdated or it can potentially have, there can be a limited variety of it. So how does one go about making sure that whatever we've collected is enough to empower, is covering all sides to empower women instead of acting as a threat to them?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me on this great panel with all the amazing ladies and for the questions here. So on this particular question, I agree with what you said in the beginning of the panel. So this emerging tech and everything, it's like a double-edged sword for women, right? Yeah, we do agree that men have a greater access, whether it's because of the biases that already exist or because of the access to technologies. But at the same hand, it is creating that distancing, but it's also allowing women to participate, to really change it from threat to opportunity, there is a huge opportunity here. Like if you look at what you said in the beginning, that women have higher access now, for example, skills like a data analyst or being part of people contributing to AI. You don't need to, for example, go out of your home. So in some countries, like women don't have access, or it's like they have difficulties in working from outside, or other problems. But right now you can just sit at your computer from your home and contribute in making sure that the data created, like you are part of the solution because you're contributing to that technology. So to enable that, so yes, there is like women have this opportunity, but we need to make sure that to really make it an opportunity, there is the required reskilling and upskilling, because as we understand that automation will likely be taking more jobs away from especially the women fields where women are more prominent. But if we do the right upskilling and reskilling, and here both governments, companies have to play a role, but also women as individuals, we need to make sure that, like, we are networking and participating, like for example in events like these, and understanding what is the future of technology, and making sure that we are learning those skills. And also another important aspect that I would just lastly like to mention here is that to make sure that women get to participate, to avoid these, to transform this from threat to opportunity, is the leadership is really important. So as we know today, there is the gap in the leadership pipeline. At the top, we mostly have men, but we need to make sure that more women get represented, they take a seat at the table, because once they are there, they'll be like, they're more likely to consider the problems of women and make sure the pipelines are, it's not biased. So it's really important that reskilling, upskilling, and then closing the bias in the leadership.
So Dr. Clarissa Rojas, we're just going to take on the question with you. I'm just going to take up from where and just change this around a little bit. We've discussed that demographies may be different, and therefore bias could be there across. Do you require diversity in groups? Elena also mentioned that there is a lack of women's voices. Muazma also said that there has to be diversity checks right at the beginning when you're creating your team. Now, considering all of this, isn't it way easier for women if there is an international benchmark which is set, an international regulation based on what the ethics and morals, whether you require data quality control at the start, what your diversity check should be. It'll put women in a better position. It'll set the benchmark, just like something like the Madrid Protocol. It sets the benchmarks, and then every country has its domestic rules and laws. So would that help women further?
Yes. Have you heard about the Athena project in the UK? So this is some initiative that was created some years ago, and they also have like these indicators of gender equality at universities. And what they do is to give like a silver award, golden award to each university based on how good they are doing initiatives to promote gender equality that are like comparable to the guidelines that they give. And I think that this is such a wonderful initiative that was also copied to bring to Australia. But today in the news, actually at Nature, I just saw that the title of the article is "Equality and Diversity Efforts Do Not Burden Research, No Matter what the UK government says." So it seems that they want to take down this great initiative because it seems that it overloads the capacity of researchers, because they have to do, on top of their normal job, to have to do these things. Something that I saw in Australia was that they were actually creating new jobs in order to fill up this initiative and to make sure that it's going to be promoted around the country and around all different universities. So I think that we have to see this as an opportunity for new vacancies for women, for example, to come into the job force, and also try to remember that this type of frameworks, as you mentioned, that already have like thresholds and settings, could be a good initiative to adopt in different countries, and we can learn from, for example, the Athena, and I'm sure that there are many other initiatives around the world.
No, absolutely, I agree. I think currently Canada, for instance, they've started one the government has started up a legislation for any AI software internally. But unlike the US, where every different company has their own separate benchmarks, so I think a common international norm sort of sets a level for everyone to adhere to, and then they kind of break down into separate norms. So thank you. But to just take that ahead also, Clarissa, on the second point is, yes, you said that it would help women to a great extent, but with the advancement and with automation, what's also happened is that it's removed a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs, recently in India, we had that as well, where a food delivery company removed several people, I think 500 in one shot, primarily because they had automated. Now, something like that, when it's not regulated, and especially for women, and I think this issue would cover men and women both, but since we are dealing with women in this matter, considering their main sectors would be soft skills like health, social service, education, if automation comes on primarily to a great extent, they would be further impacted. So how do we create the balance?
Yes, so I think that there are many initiatives that have to be promoted by different levels, by the government, by the industry, and by society itself. And some of them, for example, could be to make women aware about the MOOCs, about the open online courses that you can take from MIT, from Harvard, from your home, if you, of course, have access to internet and a good connectivity. So if we are promoting, for example, that more women going and to take into this course, to take these courses online, we have to think about the infrastructure that we need to bring internet, to bring electricity even to places where they don't have it. So that's more or less like a holistic approach. Another thing that I also want to point out is to visualize women at work. You cannot become what you don't see, right? So I think that we have to promote digital talent platforms that can really support women that are looking for new opportunities. For example, in ECPAPALEC, which is the organization that we have a campaign called Latin American Women Influencers. So in videos of 5 minutes, we show women that are working on astrophysics, women that are working on sustainable tourism, etc., different careers that explain what's their daily life working on these fields and why they encourage people to do that. I think that governments, and if it's not governments, maybe the industries that want to have like some social impact, will have some courses to reskill the unemployed and make women more digitally savvy. And also, I think that it's important to create pathways to support women in STEM and to show them that it's not just a boys' club and women are very welcome and we need more of them into the field. And I think that something that is also important is the co-creation of higher education courses that can be a combination of what the industry is looking for and what the university can provide. And then these courses are given to universities. In just a short example, NASA, for example, is talking with universities in order to let them know what are the skills and the people that they need for the jobs that are going to be available in 5 years already. So that's a good example of how different partners can get together and really think about how to change higher education curricula.
Coming to Guralai, there is a lot of debate on, how technology is important for all of us, world growth. Of course, we have to keep up, with technological advancements and advance ourselves as much technologically as we possibly can because it's for the greater good of all of us. But the problem with that, one of the problems is that it sort of reduces human-to-human interaction, and there's a lot of concern over whether that's affecting mental health. I remember even when COVID started, everyone was working from home, and there were studies that, or they were either not working or they were working from home, and there were studies how domestic violence really increased because there was no outlet. I mean, no one was going out; they were all restricted to the house. There was no external contact with or interaction with other people. So it leads to a lot of frustration, and it can affect mental health. What is your take on that?
Gulala, you're muted. Or
thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much for this wonderful panel of disruptors and innovators. I actually agree with what you say, that it has, like, we see that probably technology is a shield and, it protects women. But during COVID, what we saw was that with a lot of people using technology and a lot of people being online all the time, it had put a lot of pressure on women. And it was, you were constantly online for your work, for your children's work, you have data and statistics showing that how overworked women felt. And it did impact their mental health, of course it did. And also something that's really concerning is that the same things that men were doing online, women were doing online as well, but they were not being appreciated enough for that. So they had one job online and then they had another job offline that they were handling. And because of the lockdown and COVID, situation, in Pakistan especially, then there were some online forums which started for mental health counseling, because that really, really impacted a lot of women. And sometimes it's, in Pakistan and in many countries that we have seen, we feel that mobile ownership, or that is something, even that is known as something that can be seen as a taboo at times in some countries. We are a group of very privileged women. We are talking online, we are interacting online, we are working online, we are getting those kinds of opportunities which a lot of people, a lot of women of our age and equally exceptional talent might not be getting. If you see the GMSA report, you could see that South Asia and especially Pakistan is the only country where, apart from affordability and all these issues, you need the family doesn't approve or does approve thing. That's also a part of the survey, because the family has to approve your usage of technology. So look at the kind of situation that you want to work, you are working, especially during COVID, what we saw, and then you have the additional pressure on the family that, oh, this person is just sitting online all the time, what is she doing? You won't question a boy or a male when he or she is doing something like this. And there is another thing that I want to add to this, since I'm the last speaker, so I just want to add to this whole conversation, is that it's very important, apart from the private sector and all these disruptors and all these innovators that we have on here, it's very important to understand the intersection of policy and technology, because without that, it's something that you cannot achieve the kind of gender equality or equitability that you're talking about. Reason being that a lot of our public policy practitioners, they struggle with technology themselves, struggle with even understanding basic technology. So when it comes to technology policy, it becomes really difficult for them to gauge how to include women into it. They also, oh, let us handle the tech part first and then let's talk about women. But it should not be the case. It should be tech for everyone, and technology for everyone. And then there was also this mention about data bias. So I feel that this is something that I really need to talk about, is because that bias is not something that just came into the machine or the application that you're using. That is an inherent bias that is present in your society, in your offline spaces, and it's only just manifesting itself online, because that's exactly a product of your offline community and societies that we live in. So these are some of the issues that we should be discussing when we talk about technology and gender equality. Your question was about mental health. I just did shift to a little more because I feel that all these things are linked together, the social, cultural, policy impacts, to be able to enable and empower women through tech.
Question that when we speak of social and cultural differences in different societies across the world, to what extent do you think having awareness campaigns or teaching these courses and trying to get this taboo out of society that technology is a menace and it's going to ruin the girls, how important do you think that is, or how effective do you think those awareness campaigns can potentially be, or if courses are taught in schools from a very sort of a low in the secondary years or the primary years?
Yeah, so basically, when you talk about the social cultural impact, I don't know if some of you have heard about this research that a professor at the London School of Economics is doing, and he has actually this term for Pakistan, which is the digital parda. So one is the parda that you do when you're, just having a veil on your physically, but then Pakistani women are expected to have that veil online also. So, you can't be your own self on Facebook or Twitter, or even if you are, then, it creates problems for you. And again, I mentioned the family and everybody, so that creates problems for them. So before we can even talk about how some applications or some private sector employers or some tech companies are actually, not helping us, we need to see that it's actually the situation on ground is not easy for women at all. And when we talk about these awareness campaigns, they're extremely important. But I feel that these awareness campaigns need to move offline also. So we have online campaigns, but until and unless you reach to the people who actually have a problem, like I know for a fact that my parents or my brothers or my husband or my son, they won't have a problem with me interacting on technology. But I need to reach out to those women who actually have the problem, who actually face the digital parda syndrome. So these things are important. And at the school level, not just awareness about trying to, telling that technology is okay for women, but also including STEM education for young girls at a very young age, because that it does two things. It teaches the girls to be ambitious enough to move into those industries later on, and it also teaches the boys who are studying there with them, or the family members who see them studying technology, remove that bias about technology and women from them. So it's something that can be really beneficial, and I know of some people who are doing it very well, but it needs to be done at a much larger scale.
Moving on to the second question from Gulilai. Sorry, I heard an echo. When we speak of, making a difference, and when we speak of our efforts to sort of use technology or emerging technology to empower women, how important do you think male counterparts, or any other gender for that matter, are, it's important for them to be a part of this debate or these efforts? And how important is it for the government to sort of step in and, endorse these efforts by all these companies who are trying to empower women through technology? And if anyone else wants to add to that, please continue after Gulilai.
I think I'm one of the biggest proponents of he for she. Because in my last question, I told you that if you teach young girls STEM at a very early age, you're also training the men somehow to see them as somebody who would probably opt for a profession later on, So I think it's from the very beginning, from fathers, from male in your life, to professional lives, where you need male mentors, male sponsors, people who can help you, people who can support you. And at the government level and at the industry level, industry level, sometimes I think there are good mentorship programs that run, there are programs that encourage and enable women. The problem is that you need to do something at the policy level for them. And I feel that any gender sensitization training, any gender program, it's useless if you don't include men into it, because at the end of the day, the change that you're talking about, the change that you want to bring about, it's not something you can bring around about solely on your own self. You need the support. And again, as I said, that there was this World Bank report which says that just having digital technologies is not enough. You need a very solid on-ground analog system to run that digital technology for you and to actually have the fullest benefit of it. So when just comparing it to it, I feel that women in tech will only be there and succeed there and be accepted and empowered properly if you have those offline systems in place, which include a lot of men, a lot of awareness, and a lot of acceptance.
Thank you, Gulilai. Samia, is your mic working now? Can everyone hear me?
And before I can actually, if Samia's mic is not working, I just want to add one more thing to it, that in workspaces, when we try to incorporate this male mentors or he for she sort of campaigns, we should be very mindful of the fact that we should not be saying that women should not be seeing men as the saviors. Oh, that, I need help. They can be collaborators. They can be people you can seek help from, but not the savior complex, that actually is in the mind with so much that at the end of the day, it doesn't serve its purpose. You need to have them as allies with a lot of integrity, and you should be able to hold your colleagues as accountable for a healthy and equitable work environment as you are accountable for your work. And I think that will work. It has worked in some smaller companies that I have seen. And if you do it at a bigger scale, there will be difficulties. But as they say, nothing is impossible. I think it's something that needs to be done now.
We were talking about how emerging technology is a threat to, empowering women or generally women. If we take the other line of thinking and we say that emerging technology is actually a shield for women, it protects women. Women can actually be at places virtually where they can't physically, or where it's not safe for them to be physically, or where they personally don't feel safe to be. Or we can say that emerging technology is preparing women to handle situations which they might not be able to handle had they been thrown into them. For instance, in India, virtual reality was being used to prepare women, women to tackle situations in which sexual harassment is an issue. So to what extent do you think, how can we, these positive shifts that we are seeing with emerging technology happening, how can they have a long-term impact? And how can they affect, promote greater gender equitability and equality?
Yeah, so for long-term impacts, I'm not sure where I lost audio while answering the question last time, but one very important for long-term impact is that we make sure that there is the reskilling and upskilling. And there, like both governments, companies have to play a role, then organizations like these, where women are being made aware of what will be the skills that will be needed for them to be part of that economy of the future, the automated future that lies ahead of us. Yes, like women right now, as you rightly said, they're able to participate from the safety of their home, especially in countries where they are not allowed to go outside or work, or they have many other constraints. So that's great, but we need to make sure that whether it's, let's say, data analysis skills or any other, these tech skills, they are being taught those and being made participants in these. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there are these technologies that we're helping, like in India, with using VR. So it's also to the makers, right? So as we have more women participating in the making of technology, they will automatically think more of because they understand the problem, they will try to come up with those solutions. And they will be, that's why diversity is so beautiful and important, is because we get these perspectives and then we create the right sets of technologies. So reskilling, upskilling, and then secondly, closing the gender gap in leadership is really important, because today, as you see, the higher up is dominated by men, but we need to make sure that women take that seat at the table, because the decisions are made at the top, and when they trickle down, we have a higher chance that in the long run, women will be made part of that technology. And also, it's more women will have others to look up to, as role models, and that inspires younger girls too. And then, of course, it's hiring is also important. As we said, that yes, it's AI is being biased and everything, but the good thing is that maybe it takes out the human emotions and that influence out of the picture. So at least in that way, once we start looking at, say, better data, the AI won't be biased towards, let's say, promoting more a certain ethnic group or a gender. And from the women's perspective, I would again say that these are the steps, what they can do individually is definitely events where we are talking about this. And then, for example, making sure that on LinkedIn, they have their profiles, they're keeping up to date with trying to understand where the future is headed. And of course, I understand not everyone has, they need to be taught these things as well. They're not aware. So that's where, for example, platforms like Ananke are doing a great job creating that awareness that, hey, this is where the future is headed, and these are skills that you can learn by sitting at home. You don't necessarily need to go out, you just need an internet connection, and you can be a participant of that technology and the opportunity in the long run too.
Thank you so much, Sanya. I'd like to pose a question to all the panelists here, and that is, do you think law and regulation on inclusion of women and other genders in the tech industry, and apart from inclusion, accountability of companies, do you think law in general can make a difference?
I personally think that it can. So looking at the GDPR law, for instance, in the UK and EU, I think it did make a massive difference in terms of how we collect data and whether consent is needed. Whenever you're on the website, whether you are happy to give the right or the rights for the said website or company to take all your data or not, or to what extent is it okay or not okay. So I think it's very important that laws do exist and regulation exists to regulate some of this technology. And this is needed in order to avoid some of the latest happenings in the world of technology, like Cambridge Analytica, some of the other stuff that has been happening recently. And I think it's very important that we develop certain standards or some maybe ethics standards that can be applicable across the board as well. So I know EU is leading on some of this work at the moment, and I know there have been a lot of developments in the UK as well, particularly in light of the A-level algorithm that has affected many young people's lives quite unnecessarily. And so these laws do exist, and these laws need to be abided by not only tech companies, but also governments themselves, particularly when it's the government that creates algorithms, when it's the government whose responsibility it is to ensure that the technology that they're deploying is safe. And examples of these include track and trace apps, particularly in light of COVID. We have been giving a lot of freedom for some of the companies and technologists to collect a lot of data, to compromise on the privacy, to compromise on a lot of stuff that we thought was unacceptable prior to COVID. Right now, a lot of this is acceptable, and I think there should definitely not be any compromises when it comes to whether it's safe for people to give this kind of data, or whether we're compromising on our own safety and privacy. So obviously it does need to happen, but some regulation of companies, some regulation should definitely be happening, and this is really where the law comes into place. That's my opinion.
I just want to add that, for example, in the US now there are these regulations that people are saying we need to ensure that every company has a certain percentage of women in the leadership role. That's like they're promoting that via law, and that's what we do to make sure that women get the right representation.
Okay, I go ahead then. I think that the fastest changes happen when governments create policies that irradiate from the top down. Another example, in Peru in 2017, the president said that every institution that works for the government must create a gender committee. So this was signed in August. I was hired in September to come and advise the newly created gender committee. And there were many things that we did, from thinking about gender inclusive language, or giving workshops to explain what gender means, and it's not just women, to make analysis about what's the distribution of men and women at different levels, and then think, why is this happening? Does it mean that we need to provide some skills at work that we can improve the situation of women? And even the face of one of the agencies for the Ministry of Environment was 90% male. So the pamphlets, the advertisement, the videos, I really sat down and started counting the number of faces that you see, and that was the distribution. So we did a new shooting, photos to have a new image for this institute, and we had to have 5 men and 5 women. That's the only thing that we have to do, and we had to go into a place in 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. It was so difficult to find 5 women to come, because they said, I have to pick up my child, I have to go home, I'm having a second job, etc. That some of the bosses said, like, well, we try our best and we wanted to be equal 50-50, but it's not possible. So that's the moment when you as an advisor have to come and say, like, you as an employer have the responsibility to acknowledge these gaps in gender and find the ways on how to, I mean, it's not that you're going to go and change something at their homes, but there are things that you can change at work. So we really stood there until 8 p.m. making phone calls and trying to talk to all the bosses to try to really encourage women to go. This was good for the image. The image will be in advertisement at national level. It was something good, no? But some of the things that you see, for example, within the bosses itself, and this is something that made you laugh or not to laugh. One of them said, like, oh, Maria is going, but she's not very pretty. And then one of the lawyers, that is a female lawyer that was there, she said, as a joke, because I was already filming, but you cannot film, right? It's your job to be like completely neutral. She said, like, if that will be what we have to do, then none of the males will be here. And then we all laughed and everything was like, try to calm down, you know? But with that, I just want to say that there is a lot of resistance, but it's your job to really find a way to how to reach these people that has been growing up. And maybe they don't have a machismo culture themselves. It's just that they are completely blind to it. So it's your job to go and open those, you know, put gender lenses.
You're absolutely right. Thank you so much for that. It's got to do with the mindset, but we need to make all the effort we possibly can. Sharmila, do you have any questions? Please go ahead if you do.
No questions, ma'am. I think we can wrap up the session. I think one thing's for sure, like everyone mentioned, we need to have a regulation in place. It works top downwards. Women have to have a seat at the table, like we said, so that people get a voice, women get a voice. And I think we'd also, like Elena had mentioned right at the onset, it's not only about women, but several groups. It could be the LGBTQ, it could be the Asians, it could be ethnic minorities. There is diversity right from the onset. And like Lilay mentioned, it's not only the online campaigns. It has to go offline. It has to go down to the roots so that everyone gets it. It's not only getting the technology in, but getting the education in, getting the electricity in, getting all those basic factors which help people right from base down. But also that one thing we did understand is biases do exist. Like we mentioned, about 150 biases are already there, and you cannot remove it. But what you can do is regulate it to a great extent, so that you can have testing across demographies, testing across different sections of society, so we can try and prevent skewed results at the end. So I mean, that was quite enriching, I think, because one thing that we did realize is that you cannot omit biases, but you can work around it. Emma?
Absolutely right, Sharmila. So we can say that technology has worked its magic on quite a few women and other genders out there, but there are some problems which hopefully will be dealt with. Thank you all so much for being here. I thank you on behalf of Ananke. It's been a great session, very interactive, very informative and engaging. Thank you. Thank you so much.